Welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast, bringing you real, practical, brain-based strategies to cultivate a life and business full of freedom and fulfillment, starting from the inside out. Working hard and staying busy will only get you so far. To truly become happy, content, and who we are meant to be, we have to move beyond physical capacities and begin to reflect from within. We have to change our thoughts and our mindset into our most powerful assets, transforming you to take inspired action so you can become a better version of yourself and have the life of your dreams.
You are stronger than you believe. You have greater powers than you know.
Welcome. And today on the Go Reflect Yourself podcast, we have with us Shelley Kenow, founder and CEO of Shelley Kenow, IEP consultant, and author of Those Who Can't Teach. Shelley is making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. And she does so through collaborating with families and school districts to write individualized education programs that truly reflect the unique needs and strengths of the individual. Shelley is the author of Those Who Can't Teach, True Stories of Special Needs Families to Promote Acceptance, Inclusion, and Empathy. Shelley, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure, Heather. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'd love to just start right away talking about your book. First of all, I love the title.
Thank you.
I'm sure you get lots of jokes about teachers and
And that is exactly where the idea for the title came from.
I love it. And in the School of Rock, if you remember that movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach what?
PE. Yeah. Yeah, I actually have my own podcast, and I had a PE coach on recently, and I was talking about the book and where that comes from, and I was like, oh, I forgot about that part.
I love it. That's one of the best parts. Well, at least you can laugh about it. That's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. If you can't laugh, then what's the point of life? Laughter is such a great thing, to be in our lives every day as much as possible.
You're so right. And it's so interesting how people really do forget that. We take life way too seriously.
Yes.
And yes, there are lots of heavy things in the world right now, but there's always heavy things going on if you really seek them out and look for it. So
it's true.
Please laugh as much as humanly possible.
Yes. And I mean, you know this because you study the brain too, but there's so many neurological benefits to smiling and laughter. So it's not just one little thing of being positive. There's numerous good qualities that come from laughing and smiling. So
absolutely. And the amount of muscles and energy it takes to smile versus frown.
Yes.
And so many people still choose to frown, but that's okay.
Yeah. I have to smile because I have RBF if I'm not.
Yes.
And so I don't like walking around without a smile on my face. I always look so grumpy and crabby otherwise.
So you know what's funny about that is I have a different term for that, but I've always said my resting face looks like I'm angry, and I must have been angry my whole life. And I try to smile as much as I can, but my daughter is the one that actually recently taught me what the acronym meant that you just said. So if you don't know what that means for listeners or watchers, we're not going to explain it in more detail right now because that's not the point of this conversation. But RBF is not a very flattering term.
No, it is not at all.
Oh, so funny. Well, Shelley, let's talk about your book. Can you explain a little bit what it is and why that you really wanted to have it written?
Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, going back to the title and the reason that it is the title, because as a former teacher, I would hear that saying and I would get offended. And I honestly don't know a teacher who doesn't get offended by that saying. And the reason we get offended is because it makes it sound like somehow we're less than other professions. And I wanted to turn that on its head, first of all. But secondly, this book, and I'm pointing, it's over, I have it. So this book is all about families and individuals who were told you can't. And then fill in the blank after that. You can't run, you can't write, you can't walk, you can't be a family that has fun, you can't be happy. And the list goes on and on. And I have had a great opportunity in my career to get to know a lot of individuals and families who have a special need. And I have learned so much from them and their families that I wanted to share that. And I'm hoping that that comes across in the book. There are 10 chapters in the book. The first chapter is my story and basically how my perspective changed throughout my life. As far as I had that misconception of, oh, they're different, they can't, my experiences growing up. I just turned 50 a few days ago. And so when I was growing up, the special education law just came into effect. And yes, we were now educating people who had disabilities, but they were still down a hall that nobody went down. They were still in a tiny little closet that nobody went into. They were still stuck in the back of the room. And nobody taught me to think less of them as far as direct teaching, but it just happened because of circumstances.
Because you didn't know.
Because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anyone in my immediate family that had any sort of disability. So I didn't know anybody. And I had this really negative, I guess negative is the best word. I mean, I didn't treat anybody poorly, but I just had that cognitive bias of they're different. And so therefore they're less. And they can't, if they're not in here, they must not be able to do what I'm doing. So therefore they can't do whatever it is.
And no wrongdoing of your own. That's
Right.
just children are taught to look and relate to people like them.
Right.
That's not a negative way of teaching. It's just how it is. And so that what I'm hearing is that's probably part of the discovery and wanting to talk about this is to kind of break away some of that perspective and to say, hey, look at this person as an individual, and they may not be exactly like you. So
Right.
I'm putting words in your mouth now, but please explain that.
No, that's exactly right. And that's even something that I say in the chapter that's mine, or maybe I say it in the preface, is people are people first, not whatever their difference is.
Yeah.
And we have to, as teachers, but also as parents, directly teach acceptance for those differences, as opposed to, I so apologize for that. I still have a house phone, and hopefully somebody in the house will get it. But that we, because we've never directly taught to be negative, it just sort of happens. So we do have to directly teach the acceptance, the positive, the look for the similarities, accept the differences, and get to know somebody, no matter what the difference is. My area of passion happens to be the area of people who learn differently.
Yeah.
But this applies to anybody who is different than yourself.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so fascinated with what you do, because that's really the key. On the outside, if you don't perceive someone as being different, we just are anyway. You and I are different. We have a lot of similarities, but we have a lot of differences as well. And
Right.
how fun would that be to explore and understand versus maybe judge and the like you said earlier, the bias that we tend to develop. And that's really the pattern here, is asking the questions of understanding and awareness.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so you started as a teacher,
Mhm.
and if I understood some of your history correctly, even when you were a teacher, you still didn't quite get the connection to special needs children.
Right. Since I was 9 years old, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And at that time, it was, I want to teach third grade. I mean, that just seems logical. I'm in third grade. I want to be a teacher.
Aw,
Third grade's where I want to
yeah.
teach. Um, as I got older, I never really wavered from wanting to be a teacher. The grade levels maybe changed a little bit, or I added, oh, okay, well, like when I first got out of high school, I became a teacher's aide. And I worked in a second grade classroom and a third grade classroom. So then I thought, oh, okay, I'll teach second or third grade, all
Mm-hmm.
general ed. Throughout the time after I was 9 years old until I actually decided, okay, special education is the field I'm going to go into,
Mm-hmm.
I would sporadically get these thoughts of teaching special ed. And I always thought, I'm not going to hold the students to a high enough standard. I don't understand students who learn differently, so I'm not going to be able to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I had that less than mentality for some reason. So I started off my teaching degree program in in general education. That was interrupted. I met and married my husband and we moved overseas. And while I was overseas, we lived in England, and I worked with a school on the economy. And then I also worked for the school on the base. And
Mm-hmm.
I kept getting jobs where I didn't realize I was working with kids who learned differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably sounds really bizarre. Like, how could you not know? But I didn't think about, oh, that somebody who isn't reading as fast as someone else or
Mm-hmm.
isn't comprehending as well as someone else is someone who learns differently and someone who would be considered special education.
Mm-hmm.
So when we moved back to the United States, that was where I wanted to go. I just absolutely fell in love with kids who learned differently, and even more specifically, kids who had a lot of behavioral issues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my story in the book, I talk about a little boy who was in kindergarten at the time, and he had some very extreme behaviors,
Mm.
and they were every day, sometimes hours, or multiple times a day. And for the longest time, we could not figure out any method that would change those behaviors until we finally brought an outside behavioral specialist in. And I don't remember exactly how the magic happened, but we found out that this little guy had a problem with female authority. Guess what gender every person that dealt with him on a daily basis was?
Yeah.
Female.
Yeah.
So our behavioral specialist gave us a plan to implement, and we started that in January. By February, we had a lot less incidences and a lot less intensity, and they didn't happen as often. And in the month of May, we had zero. And that blew my mind, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
I wanted to find out more and be in that arena more.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, we came back to the States. I finished up my degree, and I'm dually certified, but I have not had my own classroom as a gen ed teacher. All of my own classrooms have been special education classrooms.
Wow. Good for you. And you telling that story first, I think is lovely for a lot of reasons, but there's so many things to really pull from that. But what I'm really leaning into is how we immediately want to label someone or something to make it nice and easy instead of taking the time for an individual to be heard. And I just think about that from a leadership level or an employee level, as an adult, as
Right.
a mom, as a spouse. It doesn't matter. When we really kind of strip everything away, the individual just wants to be heard. And obviously, as an adult, we have a whole lot more tools and skills, but still, even as adults, there's a lot of things we don't understand. And much of it comes from situations like you're talking about, when, thank goodness, that this child had people like you and the other person that you brought in to kind of identify and strip everything back and really to say, hey, what's a different approach? What's going on that we can identify and help this person? I just think everything for me goes back to, if we can be more mindful with every single thing we do, just imagine what the world would really look like. So, and it
Right.
starts with people like you.
Oh, thank you.
Such an important thing. And so that's really why I'm so fascinated with what you do. And I want to highlight that, because we can have lessons as adults really taking a look at the things that you do, because immediately you want to label a child as being a problem, kind of just push them aside. And instead of, maybe there's a different approach. So, out of that, one of the words that you use in your book title is empathy.
Mhm.
Why did you choose that word?
I think mostly I chose that word because I think personally I am an empath.
Mhm.
I do feel a lot of what I think others are feeling.
Mhm.
And I want people to change their perspective. Being a special education teacher and really getting to know some of my students' families, they felt very alone and very isolated, and as if nobody else had a clue or an understanding of
Mhm.
what happened behind their doors.
Mhm.
And when they would try to explain it to other teachers, they were often dismissed as, well, you're making an excuse. You just don't want to do the homework, or you don't want to put in the effort. And I never understood that. I don't know why people would automatically assume that they were lying about their situation
Mhm.
or making it worse than what it really was.
Mhm.
And especially because a lot of those families opened up to me over the years. And I thought, it can't just be these families that I know.
Yeah.
I'm sure every family who is in this type of situation goes through some of these same feelings. And so trying to develop the empathy, the being able to appreciate and understand and accept what you're being told about a situation.
Mhm.
And okay, maybe there might be one family out of 100 that is blowing it out of proportion, but would you rather be wrong the 99 other times and assume that everybody is like that? Or would you rather just be wrong the one time that you gave somebody a little empathy and they really didn't need it?
Yeah. Because those people, I would imagine, I mean, again, just taking my adult perspective, it's sometimes embarrassing to admit. I have a perfect situation. I have an interview coming up soon where I'm going to be talking about a quote mistake. And that's a very vulnerable thing to do, and to really unpack a time where and I don't believe in mistakes. I believe in second chances and opportunities to learn. But my point to that is you can still feel very ashamed. You can still feel the something's wrong with me because I should not have done this, or I should
Right.
not be thinking this way. So imagine as adults how we still process when we have emotions and we have issues. And again, we are supposed to have these tools and skills, but put that from the perspective of a child, and then
Right.
parents who've never dealt with this, and that shame, because if you're
Yeah.
not normal, then something's wrong with you. And if something's
Right.
wrong with you, it must mean you're bad. It must mean all these slew of things. So what I'm feeling of you saying is, again, extending from the greater humanity of things, but especially when people are going through difficult situations, having a little bit of empathy of, we don't know what it's like going
Right.
through what they're going through and being in their shoes. So
Right.
if what I'm hearing you say is you're trying to highlight and also bring awareness that there are different ways of doing things, and it doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. And it's okay if you're uncomfortable in a situation. That's how we grow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we think about anything, one of my sayings is from Ophelia in Hamlet, where she says, "We know who we are today, but not who we will be." And I use the example of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that would happen except for the immense struggle that caterpillar has to go through
Yes.
to turn into a butterfly, and then the struggle that the butterfly has to have in order to get out of the cocoon and be able to fly. And I can't imagine that was all comfortable.
Right.
And we often think, oh, this is uncomfortable, I don't want to do it, or I can't do it because it's uncomfortable, or I don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
um, the biggest thing that I think I've heard from all of the families that I have worked with over the years, and that I've known, just outside of school settings, is, as much as possible, the families that are having a special need in them do not want to have your pity. They
Mm-hmm.
just want you to accept them and include them and kind of make their lives as normal as possible,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all they want.
Yeah.
I've It used to break my heart when I would hear teachers say about students, well, they can do it, they're just choosing not to. And I would think, why would they do that?
Yeah.
Why would they put themselves through the agony of being humiliated, oftentimes, by getting red marks all over their paper and
Right.
their classmates seeing that? Why would they do that?
Yeah.
That didn't make sense to me. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that, my chapter will help people's perspective, and that the other chapters will help. And I do plan on promoting this to colleges with teaching programs, because I do want, because teachers are the ones who are interacting the most outside of parents
Mm-hmm.
with our young population. And
Mm-hmm.
I want those teachers to have that, oh yeah, I read this book when I was going through college, and the stuff that this family is saying is happening.
Mm-hmm.
It happened in that book, so they must be having a similar situation, or they're
Mm-hmm.
probably not lying. They're probably telling me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And no, even as all of my stories are varied in the type of disability that the child
Mm-hmm.
deals with, or the family deals with, or the education level of the person. Um, it's still that I'm here, recognize me for who I am, accept me exactly as I am, and just try. That's
Mhm.
really all I want is for people to just open their hearts to them. And when I had one teaching position and I was only there for a year, and then I was hired into a different teaching position. And while they were both in special education, they were very, very different. One is what is called resource, where the students just come throughout the day for a little bit of time, maybe once, maybe twice, depending on how much need they have. But they get all of their education and everything else basically from the general education teachers. And I was just there as sort of extra support and reinforcement. My second job, I had the opportunity to do that type of job again, or what was called more self-contained, which is the students are with me and they get the majority of their instruction from me and very little. So basically just the opposite.
Mhm.
And I said, well, it's I'll try, I'll give that a try and see. And that's where I stayed the majority of my career. I still had some kids who came in just a little bit at a time throughout the day,
Mhm.
but I had a cluster of kids that were with me probably 75 or more percent of their day. And I was so overjoyed and happy in that place. But had I not been willing to be uncomfortable
Yeah.
and try something different, I would have missed out on that opportunity.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing with when I quit teaching. I'm not old enough to retire from teaching. I said, I'm getting into a rut. I'm finding myself doing the same things over and over again. I went to a different teaching position, completely different district, completely different level of students. And after a year, it just, I was like, it's time to move on. It's time for me to do something else.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started my IEP consulting business. And that's when the idea for the book came about. And here we are 3 years later. And I love it. I love what I do. I love helping families all across the country, um, getting that appropriate individualized education program for their child and helping school districts understand we can do more than what we've been doing and it's okay.
Mhm. Well, gosh, again, so much out of that. But first and foremost, that comfort zone factor. And it's just a shift in perspective. You had the courage to be able to get uncomfortable, to be uncomfortable, and to go through that so you could learn different perspectives. And it sounds
Mhm.
like what a beautiful gift you were able to not only give those students, but now you've been given yourself so you can continue to share that. So you have this range of stories and range of experience where you can take that and really help others to see, to grow, to shift their perspectives, but
Yeah.
obviously to offer help in getting the proper and maybe resources so that people can continue to learn. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. So what in terms of, because I know you have a little bit of a specialized perspective since you're not in a school district, you don't have that teacher role anymore. So what's that main support that you give and who needs to reach out to you?
I really anything that involves people with special needs, but mostly I would say within the school districts,
Mhm.
the families that are going through the special education process right now, whether it's, there's this legal document called the IEP, and it's pretty daunting. I
Mhm.
understand all of that stuff, and I am happy to go through and just give you the comforting of, yep, your school is doing all that they are legally required to do, and then some, maybe,
Mhm.
or if a family is feeling like, I don't even know where to begin, like maybe my child does need to be evaluated, maybe
Mhm.
they don't need an IEP, maybe they need a 504, maybe they don't need anything.
Mhm.
Those are the people who can reach out to me.
Mhm.
and through the whole gamut then of, I mean, I've had many clients that I have been able to keep from jumping off the ledge to hiring a lawyer and filing due process against the school, which is the lawsuit that comes against a school, because the schools haven't been doing what they were supposed to do. And so I can go from maybe a tiny little bit of I don't know what I need to I know what I need and it's huge and I need help. But I can also work with school districts. I can provide professional development to the teachers and in data collection, because our feelings change from minute to minute. Our perspective changes from minute to minute. So when we're talking about a child's ability, many times we will sway one way or the other, that a negative is really more than it really is. Or what we want it to be as a positive is, oh, this child's achieving, way up here. But when you actually look at the data and properly collected data, you get a whole different perspective. So I can provide the data collection piece. I can provide behavioral strategies. I've developed over my teaching career my own behavior management system. But businesses, I know most of your listeners are parents and adults, but they're also business owners. 1 in 6 people in our country, in our world, is a person with a disability. And there are a lot of people that are sitting at home who could be very valuable in business settings, that we think because they maybe have a diagnosis of autism, and so their social skills are not as great as someone else's, that they're not going to work in our company. If you know one person with autism, one person with autism is the saying that is in the autism world, because everybody is individual. I mean, people could say to me, oh, I know a redhead and I know how redheads are. That's not necessarily me.
Maybe not.
Right. Yeah, we probably have a couple characteristics that are the same, but some of the ones that you would think we have as a commonality may not be. So reaching out to people with disabilities, they have one of the highest unemployment rates. So, they could be, somebody with a disability could be a great asset to a company. Understanding behaviors, I could come in and reach out to businesses and help them understand communication styles between coworkers, whether they have a disability or not, because all behaviors are communication. And what is that underlying communication that a person is trying to get out? It's as simple as hangry from the Snickers commercial.
Exactly.
To, oh, I'm super stressed at home and I'm trying not to carry that into my work, but it is, I really do love that investigative piece of, and I'm a good listener. Again, that goes to the empath part of me. And so, I can hear what people are saying and translate that into language that other people can maybe understand.
So
and then
go ahead.
I was going to say, and the biggest population that, should reach out to me, and they don't even really have to reach out to me directly, but it's anybody who likes to read. Because by purchasing my book, and again, here it is, Those Who Can't Teach, the proceeds from that book are going to help me provide my services to individual families at a reduced or at no cost. Because if you don't know anything about a lot of families with special needs, they have a lot of expenses, medical, therapeutic, and just lots and lots of other expenses. And they would like to have my services, but they can't always afford my services.
It's just an additional layer for them.
Right.
Is there still kind of going full circle with this conversation, even in the business setting? And I really appreciate that perspective of, hey, business owners, leaders, employees, you may not know what other families are going through first and foremost. There may be a coworker that is dealing with this situation, but because of this continued stigma that there's a label in place. They don't want to talk about it. And then on the flip side, to your point of these people are still people, and there's a lot of strengths and
Absolutely.
gifts that they have, and there's still different ways to be able to utilize that. So again, a diagnosis or a label really doesn't mean anything. It's like statistics mean nothing to the individual. So
Right.
the point here is, in my opinion, and you correct me if you see it in a different way, but the point, I think, goes back to how people can reflect first of themselves, of how they're processing, how they're seeing, how they are, what biases they might have, what situations did they have growing up, what experiences did they have where these labels make them potentially uncomfortable, or maybe they had a situation, who knows? There's a range of possibilities here, but
Right.
going back to the individual of that initial awareness. And again, I love how you phrase that of when we look at that communication, there might be a trigger, there might be an activation in me when someone's talking about a certain thing because of a situation I don't even remember.
Right.
And so there's so many nuances here and so many different ways to address this, but it goes back to people are people, just having the awareness and the mindfulness of how we're approaching others. Would you agree that it's maybe that
Yeah.
simple?
It really is. And it's of no fault to any person. We all get into our routines. We all get into a mindset or our traditions, or,
Mhm,
like I said, I had my own cognitive bias growing up that I
mhm,
wasn't ever directly taught it, but
mhm,
I developed it.
mhm,
So exactly. Yeah. Being very aware of why you do what you do and why you react to certain things the way you react. And then using that to think about, okay, this is a person, you know, and I just need to ask, like, hey, I know I've noticed that you're sitting at your desk every day at lunchtime
mhm.
instead of going to the workroom, break room, whatever. Any particular thing going on, or is it, do you have too much work? Do you have not enough work? Do you, whatever.
Yeah.
And something that I thought of when you were talking too is another thing that I can help with is being part of an EAP, an employee assistance program,
Mhm,
because as an employer, many of your families could be a family that is a
mhm,
special needs family that have to
mhm,
go on these appointments, and they, this, yeah, I can be part of an EAP program to help them feel confident with what's happening in the school setting.
mhm,
And so, going with them to an IEP meeting, if you as a company could pay for that for them,
mhm.
that would do great things for the morale of
Yeah,
certain members of your staff.
that's beautiful. That's a great idea. It's just support. And
Right.
it sounds like you have a vast arsenal of resources to be able to help and extend and provide in a lot of varied situations here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like I said, I love to talk special education, especially when it comes to the K-8, but even, K through 12.
sure.
Um, there's a whole other world of special education outside of K through 12 that I am not as versed in, but I know that there are opportunities out there that are being missed.
Yeah. If you could offer one simple strategy, maybe it's a 60-second brain strategy or not, but if you could offer just one little micro tip to help with success or overcome an obstacle, what would you say to that?
I think it would have to go back to the behaviors or communication,
Mhm,
and that behaviors are personal to the person exhibiting them, not toward the person they're exhibited at.
Mm. So don't take it
So
personally.
don't take it personally. Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
remember, it is personal. So there is something going on with the other person
Mm-hmm.
when they have, whether it's a positive or a negative. We often
Mm-hmm.
think just negative, but
Right.
if somebody comes to work and they're super happy and they're not normally super happy,
Yeah.
something probably really good happened. And we tend to ask when we see somebody super happy,
Yeah.
and we want to participate in that and encourage that and support that. But when somebody comes to work and they're not super happy,
Mm-hmm.
we tend to shy away from that. And we need to remember that there's something going on with that person, and they need to be supported and they need to be encouraged, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the IEP and IDEA. IDEA is the Federal Law Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and both the I and IEP and IDEA stands for individual, and that's not coincidence. There's a purpose and a reason for that.
So just simply putting, kindness matters. At the end of the day, kindness really goes a long way.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. And
Mm.
I think one of the other things that I have picked up on as a strategy from my own life many years ago is that I judge other people on their actions, but myself on my intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody doesn't pick up the phone and call me, I might be offended by that. But if I don't pick up the phone and call them, I can say, well, I was busy. I meant to. I'm looking at my
Mm-hmm.
intentions and I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at their actions. So
Mm-hmm.
think again, reflecting on your own reasons for why you do what you do.
Mm-hmm. Intention does not always equal impact, and
Right.
it's a two-way street there. That's a
Yeah.
great reminder. Thank you. So I'm going to make a big assumption here that if you could give one book recommendation, that it's probably a book written by this amazing lady talking about those who can't teach, right?
Absolutely. Right now, that is my favorite book.
I, I soon will be mine as well. And so you can get a copy of that book at Shelley's website. And everything we're talking about right now will be in our show notes. But your website is written your full name. So it's Shelley, Shelley, Kenow, KENOW.com.
Correct.
So the copy of the book can be purchased there. And just a reminder, you have a give back program on the proceeds from the book to help offset. So that way families who can't afford your services can still access them.
Right.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And
Shelley,
if you get the book through my website, it also comes autographed.
well, even better. That is more of a reason to do it. Absolutely. And you also have live streams on Facebook and YouTube. So I want to make sure to talk about that. So hashtag no limits,
Mm-hmm.
Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Central. And that's where you interview people who have limits placed upon them, but have busted through those limits.
Yes.
I love that. And then you've got Fridays with Fran on Fridays at 1 p.m. as well. So that's conversations with your friend, Fran. That's a mouthful to say. Your
Yes, it
friend,
is.
Fran, on Fridays.
Yep.
But those are continued conversations about special needs and overcoming and all that life has to hold with that.
Yep. Yep,
Those are
absolutely.
fantastic. Great resources. Shelley, thank you so much. Is there any parting message or wisdom you would like to leave as we come to a close of our time together?
People are people first, not whatever it is that makes them different than you.
Beautiful. I think that's all that needs to be said. Thank you for being here, Shelley. I very much appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Go Reflect Yourself. Please rate and review this episode, and if something moved you, please feel free to share. For more inspired action or to stay in touch, head on over to GoReflectYourself.com or HeatherJCrider.com. You can also take the growth mindset quiz and learn where your current growth mindset lies. Stay in touch on all social media at Heather J. Crider. Until next time, this is your host, Heather Crider, and I am challenging you to go reflect yourself so you can discover and become who you are meant to be.